Okay, chapter 9, our last one, of course, starts really right after Gatsby's death. Nick returns home from work, and really he's going to describe the next few days after Gatsby's death and explain what's going on. Okay, so right away, of course, there are tons of newspaper reporters and onlookers and people kind of flocking to the scene, seeing what's going on. You have all these rumors about what happened and people blaming Gatsby for being with Myrtle and all these false accusations, and like it's just crazy. And Nick's just like, I felt terrible because it seemed like me against everybody. I seemed to be like his only friend during the time. So Nick's expecting the funeral to be like this big, chaotic, almost like a party scene, just like it was every Saturday night. So he puts himself in charge of the funeral arrangements, kind of expecting the worst. But he quickly realizes that's not going to be the case. First of all, he gets a letter from Wolfsheim, and in it, he basically explains, sorry to hear about Gatsby. I won't be at the funeral. I can't get caught up in it. But give my regards to his family. And even says the famous quote, "Let's learn to appreciate people when they're alive, not after they're dead." So this is like the typical mafia mentality to, once someone dies, almost like not to get caught up in any shady business. Okay, so Nick's a little bit angry, but it's whatever. And then he realizes, like, after that, he doesn't hear much from anybody. There are all these people that used to come to his parties. It seems like no one's there now after he's dead, like after they can't get anything out of him. He does get a call from Klipspringer, of course, remember the dude who was living with him. And Nick is like kind of relieved, like thank God someone else cares. The funeral is tomorrow, blah, blah, blah. And Klipspringer's like, actually, I'm not going to be able to make it. And Nick's like, what are you talking about? Like, he let you live with him for 6 months. Like, you can come to the funeral. And Klipspringer's like, actually, I'm already in Connecticut. I'm living with this other family. And so Nick's like, well, why the hell did you call that? And he goes, I left tennis shoes upstairs in my bedroom. Could you go on up and check? And Nick just hangs up on him. And he kind of just, at this point, he's angry. All these people cared and now they don't. And Klipspringer kind of represents the kind of selfish person of the 20s. So Nick's just had enough. So I think finally, Nick gets the courage to go back downtown and he goes to see Wolfsheim. And he gets to his office and, of course, the secretary answers and Nick's like, I want to talk to him. And she goes, he's not here. And he like hears him behind, and Nick's like, I literally see him behind you, and he just barges in. And he's like, listen, no one's come to the funeral. I promise you there's no issue. Like, it's not some shady deal. I think Gatsby would want you to go. And again, Wolfsheim says, I can't be there. Can't get caught up in it. Like, send my regards. And that's it. So I think at this point, Nick realizes I'm the only person in all of New York who has the character to still be here, even after he's dead. So he goes back home, and he's at Gatsby's house, actually. And the phone rings. And Nick answers, and it's this weird voice. And it's like talking about, this person's in trouble. And the guy's name that the voice says is Young Park. Okay, now, if you read this in the 20s, you'd laugh. But Young Park was Fitzgerald's pen name when he was old or younger. So he's like giving himself a shout out here as an older person. So it's a funny scene. But Nick's like, listen, Gatsby died. And all of a sudden there's like this big, weird squawk and a hang up. And this is Fitzgerald's way of showing us, yeah, Gatsby was involved with illegal things. I mean, most likely he was a bootlegger, selling alcohol, but it probably escalated to more. I mean, just like Tom investigated, he's probably, using his parties as a way to get people on Wall Street to, give them insider information or, whatever. So the good thing is for Nick, he never divulges it. So he has enough character not to tell us exactly what's going on. He's even like, Gatsby's earning this money for a very honorable thing. He's trying to win over Daisy, not to try to be this jerk. Okay, so that's an important distinction to make. And then literally the day of the funeral, there's a knock at the door, and it's a guy who is older, who just got into town, and he introduces himself as Gatsby's dad. And this guy's name is Henry Gatz. And Nick says the first impression is he looked just like my dad. Like, that's how he acted. He was very reserved, very humble, and he was just shocked at his kid's house and how successful he was. And he's like, he used to send us money all the time, and I didn't read it or know about his death till I read it in the Chicago newspaper. So he is just totally proud of what his son has turned into, but he hadn't talked to him for a while. So really, the funeral that same day is going to be Nick and Gatsby's dad, and basically nobody else. You have the minister, a few of Gatsby's servants, and that's it. So they're on the way to the funeral, and Gatsby's dad starts talking about what an ambitious kid he was. You know, when he was younger, he had all these goals, and he kept track of, you know, what he got better at. All day he would work on improving himself. And Nick just says that sounds just like he was, and it sounds like Nick too. So to Nick, he's like, I just really felt terrible, like hearing this whole thing from his dad. So they get to the funeral. The service is just about over. Of course, it's raining. And right at the end, a guy shows up, and it is Alois from chapter 3. And he's like still drunk, you know, and he gets there, and all he says is he gets there and goes, that poor son of a bitch. And he just turns away and leaves. And Nick's like, that is perfect. And actually at Fitzgerald's funeral, he wanted that to be said too. So kind of a cool line, and it kind of sums it up. Okay, so after the funeral, Nick returns home. And I think he probably knew this before, but he came to the realization that he doesn't want to be in New York City anymore. Like, it took him this whole summer to realize it, but he's like, just the lifestyle, the morality, like, this isn't for me. I don't care about money anymore. I don't care about having fame. I just want to be happy. So he decides to move back home to the Midwest. But he decides to go on one more date with Jordan Baker. So the night before he leaves, him and Jordan go on a date. And it's this really awkward conversation where she says, you know, I used to really like you. Like, of course, I don't give a damn about you now, but I did. And Nick kind of says, well, thanks. Like, I don't know how to take that. And she even goes, like, I'm engaged now, so, like, you don't matter anyways. So Nick even admits to us as the reader, like, that could never work. Like, it was almost just a flirtation, and that's it. So he says goodbye to Jordan, and fittingly, he's walking through the streets of New York to go back home, and he runs into Tom Buchanan. And Tom is such a jerk in this scene. He, like, sticks his hand out, like, hey, Nick, how you doing, buddy? And Nick won't shake it. So, like, for me, I'm like, finally, Nick has the guts to stand up to him. And Tom's like, what the heck, man? Like, what's wrong? And Nick starts saying, like, Tom, don't you remember what happened a few weeks ago with Gatsby? And he goes, Gatsby, you're still worried about that guy? Like, that guy had it coming to him. And he starts explaining how Gatsby was a criminal and, like, didn't deserve to, you know, have anything he had. So Tom is just totally insensitive. And then Tom says, anyways, who'd go through all that trouble for Daisy anyways? So even like towards the end of the book, he has not changed. And Nick just can't take it. And Nick wants to say all this stuff to Tom. You know, here's the truth. Daisy was driving. Gatsby had nothing to do with it. And then he doesn't. And I think we've all been there. Sometimes if you try to argue with someone who's dumber than you, you make yourself look dumb too. So, of course, like Nick would, he takes the high road and just walks away. And that is the last time we see Tom Buchanan. Of course, we never see Daisy either. So that shows her true character too. So Nick goes back home, and this is the night before he leaves to go back to the Midwest. And the very last scene of the book, a very famous scene in American literature, he goes to Gatsby's house one last time, and he goes to his backyard. And he sits there and he looks out across the water one more time, and he looks at that green light. And he starts thinking about a number of different things. First of all, he starts thinking about really what he's learned here over the summer. He starts realizing that true America is not what he just experienced. Doesn't have to do with money and success and fame and this lifestyle. He's like, the true American dream lies in the Midwest. where people are genuine and good families and good morality, and you can trust people. And like that's the one thing he's learned. Really, at the end of the day, this is a story of kind of what America should be all about. And Nick's kind of realized that here. So that's kind of the first thing he thinks about. It's a cool section if you want to read that. The second thing he learns is really that the American dream is kind of a mirage. I mean, Gatsby wanted it, and he did everything in his power to achieve it. And at the end of the day, I mean, look what happened to him. So this idea of bettering yourself in terms of social status and financial status, at the end of the day, you've got to be happy. You've got to be true to yourself. You've got to be genuine. So that's kind of the lesson he's learned. And then he starts thinking about Gatsby as a person. And yeah, he was a little misguided in how he got his money. But at the end of the day, Nick was like, I've never met someone who was so hopeful, who was so, about the future and about what he wants and so driven. And Nick's like, that's really one thing I've taken away from him. Just that gift for hope. No matter what, that's always what he wanted. So he starts thinking about Gatsby right at the end. So as the book ends, he looks at the green light, and the very famous quote is, "So we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past." We all have aspirations for the future, and a lot of times things keep pulling us back, and no matter what we do, we can't get there. So it's a really good ending. It's a really fitting ending, considering the theme of the book, considering what we know about the different characters. Of course, we'll continue to talk here, and we have more assignments, but for me, chapter 9 is a fitting end. Okay, so it's been a long ride here, but that is The Great Gatsby.